Lou Paskalis is the Chief Strategy Officer for Ad Fontes Media. He knows X CEO Linda Yaccarino quite well, and in recent weeks was one of the number of ad executives encouraging her to resign, advising her to do so before her reputation is damaged, she said. He also wrote a really interesting piece about it. I've known him for a long time. He's been a big mover and shaker in the ad industry. We've recently talked quite a lot about how advertisers are not buying into news, which I want to get to at the end. But first, welcome, Lou.
Thank you, Kara. It's a thrill to be here with you and Scott. Bucket list event for
Yeah.
me. So
Oh,
nice to be working
good.
with you.
You're a nice fan. You've always been really nice about Pivot. So let's talk first about Linda. You've known her for a long time. You were close to her. You even were very at the time she went to Twitter when I said, "Oh no, this isn't going to end well." You said, "Oh come on, Carol, give her a chance. She'll do a good job." Um, uh, when you texted her about resigning, that was before Elon's Dealbook interview.
Correct.
Have you been in touch since? And obviously, you wrote that piece. Um, what what's the state of play right now? She's sort of all in, it seems.
She is all in, and I've texted her a number of times without reply, which is, unfortunate because normally we, had a great, exchange very quickly. But I think she's bunkered in. I think she's really focused on staying on the mechanical bull as long as possible. And I think that this is very consistent with her DNA, where quitting equals failing. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, that's a sort of short-term outcome in this context. Whereas the long-term outcome is she probably has, or maybe had, the best reputation of any sell-side senior executive in the advertising industry. It was built over a quarter century, always doing the right thing, high integrity. You could rely on her, her word was her bond. And I think she's now cashing those chips in for Elon in a way that I don't think he's capable of reciprocating.
Yeah. So after the interview, she, as you said, she sent a memo to ex-employees saying Musk, quote, shared an unmatched and completely unvarnished perspective and vision for the future. This is after he cursed out advertisers. She also, which was shocking to me, she also said in the post about X standing at the unique and amazing intersection of free speech and Main Street, which was possibly one of the worst metaphors I've ever heard. Do you actually think she believes this stuff, or is she just determined? What is causing this? I think she believes it now. I think she actually believes it. Maybe not. I don't find her to be a particularly cynical person over the time I knew her.
I think she wants to believe it, and I think she's searching for arguments to make it believable. And I think it's resonating with a certain audience on X that has really consumed the Kool-Aid. Every time I get interviewed, I get harangued by these people who are accusing me of hating free speech, which I find laughable given my
Mhm.
side hustle to save news. So I think she's slowly building what Walter Isaacson would have described as a reality distortion field when in the book Jobs.
Mhm.
And I think she probably sees the counter argument, but she's making the case as best she can because she's tenacious as hell and she's going to make her argument.
Okay, last question. Then Scott will have a question. When I predicted, when I wrote that Linda was going to be the CEO, you responded to me on Twitter saying she would be my first choice and my only choice to save the platform from the hands of its owner. You also noted, I still cannot understand why she'd subject herself to Elon Musk. However, um, you did think it could work, correct?
At the
Correct.
beginning, I did because I thought it was rather self effacing of Elon to recognize that he was never going to be able to change his behavior in such a way as to appeal to advertisers. And there were all these incidents that happened before the
Mm-hmm.
last
Same. Yeah.
Influence Council, which was a legacy of Twitter, which was a shocking meeting where he basically said advertisers were going to have to create a distance between how he himself acted and buying the platform, which is not a possibility when you work in corporate America. How the CEO speaks is representative of the platform's values. But I thought she could influence him. I thought it was a moment where Elon said, "Okay, for me to be successful, I'm going to have to learn from others, and I'm going to go and buy the best person I can." But he didn't empower her. It was very evident when the name change was affected that she was not part of the comms plan, which I found shocking having grown up in corporate America. She was basically behind a parade, cleaning up the elephant poop and saying, rah, rah, this is great. But it didn't feel like she had a meaningful role in it. And it seems like she's not being allowed to exert the kind of influence that he paid to get and that would have helped him. And now that's affecting her ability to help him, even if he were to change his behavior.
Scott?
Good to see you, Lou.
Likewise, Scott.
So it's not that they've registered a 50 or a 60% decline in advertising revenue that's surprising. It's that they still have 40 or 50%. So make the bull case for advertising on Twitter. What do you think her pitch is? You're in this business. Give us the pitch. You're NBC Universal or NBC UI, whatever it's called, her old employer that's actually stopped advertising. What's the pitch to come back on the platform right now?
Scott, I really struggle with that because, I think, as you know, in its heyday, I was an enormous supporter of Twitter and I was a huge advertiser on Twitter. News broke on Twitter, culture broke on Twitter, sports is better with Twitter. The only use case I personally have anymore is during Formula One races, which is a very international community. And I'm a huge Formula One fan as I connect with the people that I'll never meet all over the world. And we watch in real time and we snark in real time. I think it's different if you're activating in sports, if you've got a league sponsorship, there are immediate plays to extend that. Keep your eye on the NFL deal. Will the NFL continue to endure being associated with Twitter in coming years? I think that's one. They don't have a good performance product. They never did. It's always been their weakness, their Achilles heel. So that limits their ability to appeal to DTC. And, they're pivoting now to small and medium-sized businesses. You're going to need an awful lot of those to make up for the companies that walked away. And so as she walks into corporate America, I don't really know what argument that she has other than to say, activate your sponsorship. And I just read an article this morning that, people are moving their Super Bowl sponsorships, which was always the biggest week on Twitter from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah.
And they're moving them to TikTok. They're moving them elsewhere where it's much harder to activate, but they just don't want to take that risk. And that's where the margins are. It's those big brandy plays, not those, direct to consumer, small, direct response plays. I wouldn't know how to begin to sell that platform to any well-governed company.
Wow. Not anything? You're an ad guy. You've heard every ad guy trying to get you to spend money.
Yeah, and
woman, ad person.
Absolutely. And it's really hard for me to say this. I loved the platform before Elon bought it. I'm a huge fan of Linda Yaccarino. I don't see a path forward with advertisers. And I think that's why Elon made the statement he did at DealBook. I think he went there wanting to deliver a message like he did. I think he knew that after his, post October 7th unfortunate retweet, that the path forward with advertising was dead to him because, anti-Semitism is the third rail. And I don't think there was recovery. And so I think his approach was very much like Cortez when he landed in the New World in 1519. The first thing he did was burn the boats, so nobody was going back. I think he burned the boats to advertising. Linda's going to keep trying, but he's moved on to another revenue model that he has in his head that I am not smart enough to understand. But the man's a genius. And, we'll wait and see if he's got something up his sleeve that the rest of us aren't seeing.
But just to follow up on that, if you think he's moving to a non-advertising based revenue model, what does she bring? Does she survive as CEO? She doesn't have any background in AI, doesn't have any background in payments. She's an ad salesperson.
I think it's a fair question. I think that, maybe what he's learning, although I would say in a not so, productive way, is that before you jump to the new thing, you need to still continue to nurture the old thing, right? He doesn't have a good track record of doing that. What I do know is that, there's few people that are better than Linda at figuring it out, at being able to pivot, to adapt, whatever. And, she does have relationships above the CMO level where some of these new revenue models that he's thinking about, some of these new businesses that he's bolting on.
Content deals.
Yeah, content deals. She's kind of hinting at sponsorship, which, again, it's got the same set of issues, I think. But, I think she'll be around for a while. I think in the relative scheme of things, she's not that expensive considering what he's trying to do. And she can still knock on doors and get in rooms, even if she's not getting ad money as a result.
So when the advertising community, are they going to come back? Is there, it never worked before. It never worked for us. It never, why would are they going to come back, or is this is it a pause, or it's like, that's enough of this? Because
I
there's
think this
better
is the
places
first.
to put their money,
Yeah,
correct?
this one is really clear to me. And, I put myself in the context of having run ad buying operations for major brands for 3.5 decades. There is no scenario that's going to cause me to go to the management team and say, you know what? We've looked at what X has to offer from an advertising perspective, and we're going to go back up on the platform, and you're just going to have to ignore the risks of Elon Musk, his current and future antics. I don't know if the management team would laugh me out of the room or have me escorted out of the room. But I know I'd be out of a job in 24 hours because part of the job is risk mitigation. A big part of the job when you're a Fortune 500 company is saying, do the risks offset the rewards? And the risks are usually, well, we reached the right audience. Does the platform have enough scale? Does our creative resonate against this audience? This is, will our customers boycott us if we go up on Twitter? Will the board call the CEO's judgment into question? Could I get my CEO fired? These are risks that have no offset whatsoever from an advertising value. And so I would never make that recommendation. I can't imagine people wanting to come back from that. And my bigger concern isn't the GFY comment that he said to
You
Andrew
can
Ross
say it on
Sorkin.
this. You can say
I
it
don't
on
want to.
this.
Listen. I leave
It's
that to you guys.
Jonathan.
I leave that to you guys.
Jonathan. It was go
Uh,
fuck yourself, but go ahead.
okay.
Several times.
When he said go fuck yourself twice to advertisers, there he got me to do it. I'm actually less concerned about that than what he did immediately afterward. Hi, Bob. This is what corporate communication functions fear most of all. And I have to tell you guys, and it's a topic for another day, marketing has been suborned in most major companies to corporate communications. These are risk averse people who are really there to promote the CEO and his talk track, right? And the minute that he singled out Bob Iger, every one of them said, that's it. I'm not going near that because God forbid we go on the
That's
platform
right.
and then choose to come off again at a later date. We might get singled out. And I'm not getting my CEO singled out, and neither is the media guy. So I think he slammed the watertight door. He's dogged it down, and he has moved on. And advertisers on the other side of it are not pushing on that door at all. I think it's a parting of the ways, and I really doubt you're going to see major, well-governed companies come back.
Wow, well, there it is. Let me ask you. I want to ask you one more question about this. So, and you think she's staying no matter what? She doesn't.
She's staying no matter what.
Where could she? Is she ruined her career, or can she recover if she
No,
leaves?
I still look at this as the biggest virtual intervention in history. The entire ad community, people who do what I do,
Mhm.
all of whom, we know each other. It's a Yenta fest. We all, we go to the same events. We have the same
Mhm.
conversations. We're trying to run an intervention for her to get her out. There's a million things she could go do. She could run Amazon's ad platform. She could, she can recover from this. The only thing that, you have to give her a mulligan on is the Vox interview, which was a whole nother thing that you guys have talked about before, which was just on her best day. But she's so well respected in the industry. Everybody would be like, well, she tried. We kind of thought it wasn't going to work because of him. It didn't. It's not her fault. And now she's going to end up somewhere else.
She's
So I
now
think she's
doubled
got
down.
runway.
Yeah, but she's
Yeah,
doubled down.
I know.
She's
I
really
know.
doubled down.
She's doubled
Whoa.
down, but she's doubled down against climbing Mount Everest, where a lot of people fail. And, I said in an interview last week, that hill went from steep to vertical now because of his
Right.
behavior. But she's not going to let go of it. But the advertising community will give her a break. The question is, will people who don't know her, but who seem to have formed opinions of her in the last couple of months also give her that break? And that is, unknown.
All right, Scott, last question, then I have just one more about a different topic. Go
So,
ahead.
Lou, you sit at sort of the helm of the bobsled looking at flows of advertising revenue, just more broadly speaking. And by the way, just a quick comment. As someone who didn't know or anything about Linda before, I think this has been a total disaster for her. To me, she just looks, not knowing how impressive a person she is, and I trust your judgment, and Karis has said very complimentary things of her. Coming into this with a clean slate, she strikes me as the worst CEO of the year, hands down. If Time had said worst CEO of the year, it would have been this individual is just being mocked and made a fool of, and every day just looks worse and worse. But anyway, the You sit at you have a bird's eye view into capital and advertising flows across the major platforms and major mediums. I just love your sort of cliff notes on which platforms are doing better than people think, not as well as people think. Like, what are you seeing out there in the ecosystem?
I think there's really a search for quality engagement, and the places that you get the kind of quality engagement have bifurcated based on the audience that you're going after. You're seeing certainly one social platform emerge as the sort of killer app, and that's TikTok. Marketers have to work really hard to get quality engagement there, but when they get it right, they really get it right. So there's a lot more effort being put in there. There's this symbiotic ecosystem between what are called retail media networks. These are the Walmart, the Walgreens, the Albertsons, the Krogers of the world that are now in the ad business, who have great first party data, Scott, but they don't have the kind of scale that they really need. And so they're forging alliances with CTV. CTV is also login. That's the Netflix of the world, the ad supported sides of Hulu, et cetera, et cetera. And they're trying to build an ecosystem where there's rich first party data, there's quality engagement, there's up and down funnel. And I do think in a broader context, we're seeing some really interesting green shoots. We just did some research at Advantes Media with Civic Science, which showed that young people are now turning back to quality news platforms for their news and away from social media because they feel like they were duped in 2020. So Gen Z and millennials, they're now saying we're not going to get duped. And I mean, it's a sign of hopefulness. It's a sign that people are kind of taking the reins back in. So I think accountability, transparency, and trust are kind of coming back in, and that quality publishing in general will do well. But, it's not without headwinds, as you know.
But a more pointed question. What's the easiest platform to sell for you right now to an advertiser?
Look, if I'm an advertiser, where I'm going to start, where I get the best targetability, the best addressability, the best scale of addressability, and that is pretty much any ad-supported CTV platform. And then I would augment it with linear, and then I would go into addressable digital. So what's old is new again. There's so much headwind, Scott, on programmatic right now. The ANA just dropped their full study the other day, which, full disclosure, I worked on, which just said that one in every $5 that's being spent in the $88 billion programmatic industry globally is going to bad actors, either made for advertising sites that deliver a terrible experience, or these really low quality publishers that say, if you have these three symptoms, you might be dying of fungus, which have no basis in reality. And so I think we're seeing a flight to quality. A lot of that quality is from established companies. I think you're going to actually see a little bit of a bump in really old school stuff, like, I'm not kidding, terrestrial radio, linear TV, things that have measurability to them that give you scale, and then addressable that's accountable. And I think that's what you're going to see. And I think there's going to be a whole lot of skepticism about programmatic moving forward, which is a huge part of the digital ecosystem now.
I have a last question, Lou. You have been pushing for this, for people to buy into news advertisers, which they don't want to do, even though they willingly go into more controversial platforms like X. Can you, very briefly, because we only have a little bit of time, why is this important? You and I had a great talk about this in France at Cannes Lion.
So we're living through an era where there's a war on truth. And I mentioned this to you when we talked. It was 8 years ago when Kellyanne Conway was standing on the lawn of the White House and answering a reporter's question by saying that the president was using alternative facts. And I naively Googled that. I thought that was a thing. Well, now it is a thing. And the only people who are defending the truth in the war on truth are journalists. It's allowing for all sorts of zoning and school board issues that lead to the burning of books, which sounds like Germany in the mid 1930s to me, because you don't have local reporters there calling it out. And marketers are uniquely called out in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights in their role to support journalism to keep politicians on track. And we've got to do more there. And Kara, it's not just an eat your vegetables message about it's your civic responsibility to support journalism. it delivers enormous return on advertising spend. It delivers enormous unduplicated reach. These are the things that advertisers crave. And they're ignoring that because of unfounded fears about getting caught up in the cultural wars, which again are being driven by corporate communications and have no basis in fact.
Yep. So people should advertise with news.
In news,
organizations.
yeah.
It's so much more dangerous elsewhere. It's so funny that they
Yeah.
probably want to keep up with the young people.
I know where
In any case, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I know we're at time, but what they're doing is, ironically, they're moving their money unbeknownst into MFAs, these bad made for advertising sites, which are engineered to appeal to that money and appear to be brand safe, when in fact they're not, and they're actually taking the money away from journalism. And that $10 billion slice of pie that's going to MFAs, if that went back into journalism in the United States, you would see robust newsrooms and robust local reporting.
We're the real deal, Lou. That's right. So are you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So insightful and fair, I have to say. I know you like Linda, and I know you were very close to her. And this, I hope she listens to you, because
Thank you, guys.
You're a better friend than she realizes, I think.
I appreciate you saying that. It's an honor to be on with both of you.
Thanks, Lou.